UFC Fight Night, Royval versus Taira is happening this weekend, October the 12th. I'm going to be doing my breakdown on all the fights on the card, starting with the early prelims. We're going to end with the main events. I'm just going to be giving my breakdown from based off of just their last fight. And as we go on with the card, obviously, as I become more familiar with the fighters, I can give a more in-depth breakdown. But for the early prelim fighters, I'm just going to be going based off of their last fight. So without further ado, we will start with the first fight of the card, which will be the early prelim opener of Carpenter versus Lucas Rocha. Now, Carpenter, he's a quick, strong jiu-jitsu guy, at least from what I saw. He hasn't fought in a while, not since like 2023, early 23. But he's got good defensive jiu-jitsu. It's really solid. He's incredibly flexible, which helped him latch up like body triangles and attempt different subs from the bottom even during his last fight. Roca, he's a striker. He's got some wrestling experience. The only problem I have is that he's got a long torso, short arms, and I think Carpenter is going to target that with leg kicks because in the strikes that he threw some good leg kicks. He has good timing with his shots, so he's able to counter. He's able to land when he kind of figures out the rhythm of his opponent. But unless he's significantly improved his ground game, I think that Carpenter is going to take this fight by submission. Up the card, we've got Dan Argueta versus Cody Haddon. Now, Argueta, wrestling heavy fighter. He's got good takedowns, really good wrestling. His strikes are decent, but his wrestling approach, he wrestles really heavy, really hard. It takes a lot of energy, and unless he's getting the sub in the first half, I think he starts to fade a bit. His last fight, he was really dominant in the opening, but then he got caught in a guillotine after like being gassed because he was wrestling so hard. He even like passed out from it. Cody Haddon, aggressive, come forward guy. He's got power in his hands. He's got great jiu-jitsu and wrestling. He uses his striking to hurt his opponents and then pounces in for the sub once they are hurt, which I find very impressive. There's not a lot of guys that can do that properly, I feel like right now, where they'll hurt somebody and then they'll smother their own work and ruin a potential finish. So I think I'm going to lean with the Cody Haddon finish for this fight to beat Dan Argueta. Moving up, Junior Tafa versus Sean Sharaf. Now, Junior Tafa was supposed to be fighting Chris Barnett. Unfortunately, Chris Barnett had to pull out due to Hurricane Milton potentially affecting where he lives. And pretty soon I might actually be going and helping out with any issues that come up there potentially, but we'll see. Junior Tafa, he's a striker. He doesn't really have any ground game. His last fight, he got taken down and controlled and then, verbally tapped to a heel hook. Sharaf is a striker, heavy hands, and I think it's just going to be a really fun fight with the big boys swinging at each other. So I actually think I'm going to lean towards Sharaf. He's got nice combos up close. It looks like he hits really hard. So I think I'm going to lean towards Sharaf getting the finish. Up the card, Nico Price versus Themba Garimbo. Now, Nico Price, striker, and he stays really consistent during the fight. His wrestling defense needs some work, but if you don't bring him down and sub him, he'll continue to come at you at the same pace that he started the fight at. So he's just constantly coming forward, and meanwhile, you're getting more and more tired. He's still pushing the same pace. Garimbo, at least from the fight that I saw, is kind of a stalling fighter. Grabs and holds you against the fence, tries to get takedowns. He does get good takedowns at least, which isn't as bad as some other fighters. But I think Garimbo will try to grab a hold of Price and wear him out on the ground. So I think I'm going to lean for a Garimbo decision. Up the card, Pierce versus Pat Sabatini. So Jonathan Pierce, wrestling heavy fighter. He's got decent strikes. He sets up his takedowns by kicking the body and landing punches. And then he also lands trips up in the clinch. His last fight didn't go his way because his opponent did really, really well in the wrestling defense. Really, he was doing everything right, but his opponent was just better on the ground than him, unfortunately. Sabatini, he's a strong wrestler. He uses trips and the ground and pound to work towards submissions. Super stocky guy, really built dude, and his strength just lets him grab holds of his opponent and drag him down to the ground. So I think I'm going to lean towards I didn't write down who I thought was going to win. I'm going to go with Pierce. I think Pierce is going to take it. Moving up, we've got CJ Vergara versus Temirov. Now, Vergara, striker, he's got good hands. He seems to have okay takedown defense, but it's just in his last fight, his opponent that he had, super strong grappler and wrestler, who was able to hold him down on the ground pretty easily. His shots have power. He's got a good measure of distance and timing. Temirov, and he's a pretty aggressive and patient striker. He has power in his hands. He's got a decent chin, looks like. But I think that Vergara is just going to be able to pick him apart at range and potentially win the fight by TKO in the second round. Up the card, Chidi Njokuani versus Jared Gooden. Now, Njokuani, striker, really good with takedown defense. Strikes are clean, especially his low kicks. He throws them right above and below his opponent's knee. And like the last guy he fought, like within the first minute of the fight, just a red welt on the side of his leg, just from those spots that he kept landing kicks to. He's also got decent teep kicks. His strikes are nice. They got power behind him. Jared Gooden is a striker. He's got an iron chin. He took heavy shots in his last fight, but he seemed fine to eat them. He did get a little wobbled, but nothing crazy. He lands good shots to the body, but I just think that Njokuani is a bit bigger than him, is going to be able to piece him up at range, and I'm going to lean towards Njokuani decision. Yeah, Josh Fremd versus Razak Al-Hassan. So Fremd, striker, decent kicks and punches. His last fight, he kind of got taken down and smothered by Petrosky. So it was a little hard to get a good gauge on what I think he's good at. But his wrestling defense against submissions, at least, is very good. And that could just be a Petrosky sucking, though. But he needs to work on getting back to his feet after being taken down. And Al-Hassan is an aggressive striker. He's got power in his hands. His takedown defense is pretty good. I think this fight is going to be pretty fun, but I'm going to lean towards an Al-Hassan finish. Up the card, Daniel Rodriguez, Alex Morono. Is it Daniel? I don't know. Anyways, D-Rod, good striker, decent takedown defense. He's got good strikes and some pretty good hands. Morono actually fought Nico Price higher up in the card and lost, which is interesting. But I just don't think he's going to be able to keep pace with D-Rod. I just don't think he's going to be able to keep pace with D-Rod, and I'm going to lean towards a D-Rod decision. Up the card, Corey McKenna versus Julia Palastri. McKenna, she's a grappler with some decent striking. Her reach is a bit of a disadvantage. She's got pretty short arms, but she is fast, and she's strong on the feet. Her ground game is really good if she can get you there. Palastri is a striker with some decent takedowns. When she has an opponent hurt, she shoots the takedowns and starts the ground and pound, which I thought that was really nice. But I don't think she's going to be as successful against a wrestler in McKenna, mainly because she was just getting pieced up a lot on her last fight. So I wasn't a huge fan of that. So I'm going to lean towards a McKenna decision. Grant Dawson, Rafa Garcia. Now Dawson, he's a strong come-forward guy. He's got good strikes. He's got good wrestling. One of the few guys in the division that can maintain top control and land ground and pound, but that could just be the level of his opponent that he's facing right now. But he's got good wrestling defense. He's got decent power in his hands. And there's not a lot of guys that you see that can stay in full mount and be, consistently landing ground and pound, So I thought that was neat. Garcia, stand-up striker. He's got decent strikes. He's a patient guy. But his last fight was against Clay Guida. So I really can't rate that performance. No offense to Clay Guida, but, I mean, the man's a dinosaur, And I think Dawson's just going to be the bigger guy, able to land his strikes and takedowns. And I'm going to lean towards a Dawson finish. Up the card, Brad Tavares versus Jun Young Park. Tavares, striker, nice counters, stays calm under pressure, and he lands his own shots even when he's being pressured against the cage. He's got good takedown defense as well. Park is a striker. He's got good takedown defense, decent ground game. He's able to get out of compromising positions and even reverse them if you let him. But I'm going to lead. Excuse me. I'm going to lean towards Brad Tavares' decision. And last but not least, Brandon Royval versus Tatsuro Taira. Now, Royval, southpaw striker from range, uses a lot of feints, got good footwork, and he throws sneaky little kicks in there as well. He does leave his hands a little low, and I don't like how he leaves his chin out when he's like leaning for a punch. I really don't like it. Taira, very composed, clean fighter. He does need to work on his defense because he got hit a lot in his last fight, but he's got a real strong tie clinch, and his knees in the clinch is very impressive. When he starts getting the read on a fighter and he starts learning the pace, he starts landing his counters, and he'll get into a rhythm if you let him. And he's got really good wrestling, it seems, good jiu-jitsu, and his punches have power behind them. This one is a toss-up because I don't think he's ready, personally. But I don't know. Just based off of Royval's last performance against Moreno, he seemed very hesitant, seemed very open, and I think that Tatsuro Taira is going to be fast enough to exploit that. So I'm going to lean towards a Tatsuro Taira decision victory. All right. So let me know what you guys think of the comments. If you disagree, agree, I'd love to hear from you guys. All right. See you at the next one.